I want you to think about the word PTSD. Now, you probably thought about a soldier coming back from a battlefield in some foreign country. But what about a little kid who just watched their mom die of cancer? Or a 15-year-old who had to watch his friends be killed in a school shooting? Did you think about them? Probably not. Out of the 43% of kids under 18 who are estimated to have experienced a traumatic event, only 4.5% of them are diagnosed with PTSD. And part of the issue is PTSD is so much harder to diagnose in kids, partially because we don't think that it happens in kids. But what if there was a way we could accurately and efficiently diagnose PTSD in kids without the current methods that are more subjective and positioned towards adults? I want to use a biomolecular computer to diagnose PTSD in kids through decreased activity in the amygdala and insula of the brain. You see, when the brain experiences PTSD, it creates different connectomic signatures. And so that's essentially like the way your brain is composed of. Think of it like a stamp on your brain. But when you experience this traumatic event, it changes the makeup of your brain. And so it leaves this distinct marker that we can then find using different tools like MRI. But right now, our current tools aren't so great at using that. So if we go back to thinking about PTSD in general, right now, PTSD has a long list of symptoms that you can have, specifically targeted towards adults. It wasn't really into the later 1990s that we started to see this criteria for children. And even now, it's still very targeted towards adults instead of children. If we go to the other method of diagnosing PTSD, we see what is called an fMRI or a functional MRI. A functional MRI is basically just like a regular MRI, a picture of your brain, but allows us to see how different parts actively work together. So like if you're asked, what is 2 plus 2, we can see what part of your brains are functioning to understand that. Now, part of the issue with this is that kids in general don't show the same symptoms and even the same brain activity as adults. We know that it can be as old as 25 before your brain is even fully developed. So how can we expect it to look the same on an fMRI? And obviously they show different symptoms. And this is where the biomolecular computer comes in. So a biomolecular computer is essentially this really tiny nanoscale computer, except for it's made out of biological substances, such as like cells, like you would have on your skin. See, we can use these because they're really good at binding biomarkers, such as the connectomic signatures we talked about that are in our brain. Biomolecular computers use a input-output system, a logic gate, to essentially find these biomarkers. And they've done this for lung cancer, prostate cancer, all sorts of different types of things. Now, the other issue is the biomolecular computer, it might seem hard for it to get into the brain because we have something called the blood-brain barrier. And essentially, it's like a blockade, keeping all the stuff in the rest of our body out of our brain for obvious reasons. But as we mentioned before, the biomolecular computer is really tiny. Basically, the biomolecular computer is going to be programmed using one of the logic gates, an AND logic gate, which means that it's looking for 2 different types of inputs in order to provide the output, which would be a positive diagnosis of PTSD. So these inputs are going to be the connectomic signatures left behind from the decreased function of the amygdala and the insula. So once it is programmed with all this stuff and it's in your body, it's in your brain, and it finds these, it's going to be looking for these signatures. And the way it does this is just like any other computer. It's going to scan over the surface. And it's actually going to be really easy to find because it's going to look different than your brain should look like. Your brain changes with these events, and the computer will be able to recognize that. Now, it is a biological computer, so it's not going to be quite as quick, but it will essentially take the same process as an AI mechanism on our computer would do. So, now that it's diagnosed you with PTSD, how does it transmit this information? Essentially, this information can be transmitted in one of two ways. The first way, which is probably the most realistic, is the doctor retrieves the computer from your body. We can program it so that it will go through your body and exit normally, as in through your bowel movements. Then, once it's there, we can pick it out and we can get all the information from it. The other way would be somehow transmitting it from your body. But since these computers are still being developed, especially for medical uses, that's probably less realistic. So you're probably thinking, we mentioned that nanobots can do a lot of the same things. Why wouldn't we just use nanobots? What is the real advantage to using a biomolecular computer? See, one thing is a biomolecular computer is made out of biological substances, which means it's meant to be in your body. This computer does not pose any threat of immune rejection, which can result in a lot of serious illness and damage, and sometimes even death. The other thing is that the biological substance can be programmed to detect specific other biological substances in our body. And it's so small, even smaller than a nanobot, that we can get it to essentially anywhere in your body to do that. There are a few drawbacks. Biological computers, just like nanobots, can't immediately go to where we want them to go. This means it might take a week, a few weeks, maybe even a month to get your diagnosis instead of immediately, like with an fMRI. But just like going through therapy, it would still take time. So it's not really that big of a difference. The other drawback is getting the information as efficiently as possible. Because when this bot is going through your body, we could make mistakes. Just like any other medical device, we might not get 100% accurate. But because we're going to the direct route, the direct cause where your PTSD is, we're going to have a better chance than most other medical equipment. So, as crazy as this sounds, would you have a tiny computer put into you if it meant that you could live your life like normal again? Who knows? Diagnosing is the first thing, but what if next we could treat PTSD with this computer? Biomolecular computers have the potential to change a lot of people's lives and do it in a way that's minimally invasive, safe, and efficient.